Star Trek Deep Space Nine first hit our screens in 1993. A year previously, Playmates had begun launching their Star Trek line of 5-inch action figures. Initially, this line was built on the success of The Next Generation, so their primary focus, of course, was producing figures from that show. However, with the launch of Deep Space Nine and the buzz around that, they soon picked up the license and began to produce figures from DS9. Playmates' line of Star Trek figures was so popular, they began to experiment with different scales. And the next scale they introduced was the 9-inch scale figure. And so, during this time, Playmates were able to produce a series of Deep Space Nine 9-inch action figures. Now, they almost did the entire crew. We got to see Jem'Hadar, Bashir, O'Brien, and we got 2 different versions of Captain Sisko. The first one was taken from his early seasons look when he was Commander Sisko, and the second is ambassadorial uniform. But of course, more crucially, this is his look from season 4 onwards. Now sadly, they never made Quark in this line, and not only Quark, but actually no Ferengi in this scale whatsoever. But they did do a number of different Worfs, so you can more or less round out the entire crew. But they also did a number of villains and aliens from this world as well. And today I'm going to be taking a look at my favourites from this range. So I'll start by looking at Sisko. Now, the first thing you're probably going to ask yourself when you see this figure is, why haven't I seen this version of Sisko before in his season 5 to 7 uniform? That's because he was never released like this. This is actually a custom that I've made. I've essentially taken the Ambassador release and combined it with the Next Generation First Contact figure uniform. This is my overall preferred look for Captain Sisko. This is how I think of him. I love those uniforms from that era. And I think that's one of the really fun things about the Playmates is that you can swap and match the different outfits to create really easy customs. And I think the end result is pretty brilliant. The likeness is a little soft, but it is close enough, and I think that's perfectly appropriate for a figure made at this time, aimed at children as well as collectors. Now, the articulation is the same across the board for these figures, so I'll just go through it once. His head has a swivel, so of course it can rotate 360 degrees if you want it to. There is a ball jointed shoulder there, so his arm can lift up and to the side and can go back a fair distance as well, which is great. It does have a single jointed elbow, and that's it. There is no wrist articulation or anything of that sort. That's it. There's also no waist swivel or an ab crunch. There is a hinge at the hip, so the legs swing out and they kick forwards and backwards as well. They have single jointed knees, so they can kick back. And that's it. Again, there is no foot articulation, there is no swivel at the calf. That's all you get. And the boots, or whatever shoes they have, are usually moulded into the figure. Now, I've chosen to give Sisko a phase rifle and a phaser. If you buy enough of these figures, eventually you're going to be able to collect quite a number of different weapons and data pads and different bits of equipment that you can put with these figures. So again, when you're customizing, you've got a wealth to choose from. For me, these are what I generally associate with the character, and I thought it was a good opportunity as well to point out the differences that you get with the accessories in this line. You can see with the phase rifle that it's a screen accurate prop. There's a lot of attention to detail on there. It is scaled nicely. I think it's a little bit too large, but it's pretty decent. And there are a number of different paint apps going on. We can see the grey, we can see the black, we can see the blue on the handles. This makes it look really authentic and it looks really, really good. But sadly, this is something of a rarity in the line because what we tend to get are these single pieces that have yet to be coloured. So although the mould is really good, when we look at the phaser, it's spot on. It's got all the little details on there, lots of detail, but no colour. So it tends to look very, well, it's very toyetic, it's very simple, but it just doesn't pop and it doesn't look quite right. It looks a bit childish when it's in the figure's hands, which is a real shame because if it just had a little bit of paint app, if it just had a bit of grey in there, a bit of black, then it would look really, really good. Next up we have Kira, and I really like the contrast of the uniform here. It's a lot more colourful. I also like that obviously she's an alien, so it's a very different kind of sculpt in the head. We can see the rings in the nose, which is really nice. And there's a lot of attention to detail here as well, things like the belt and the little icon on her shoulder. I think it looks really good and visually it's very appealing. The belt is a separate piece. It's made of felt and it is connected together by Velcro. There are little touches like the paint apps on the belt there, those circles, just give it a bit more texture, a bit more flavour, which is nice. And as you can see, there is the Velcro there that holds it together. So this is a nice effort. It could have been a plastic piece, but they've decided to make it out of cloth, and I think it looks good. I love that they've gone to the effort of putting the Bajoran symbol on her neck piece there, on her collar. I think that looks brilliant. It's such a nice little thing and it's so perfectly rendered. It's very effective and it's well done. Now the tops of her boots are actually a felt piece again, and they've decided to sort of strap these on to the bottom of her actual moulded boots. I'm not convinced by this look myself. It's a nice idea. I don't think it quite works in execution, and it looks a little bit silly. And she does of course come with her Bajoran phaser pistol as well. Again, it is suffering from the lack of paint. It really could have done with, some extra colours in there, a bit of shading, and I think this would have looked brilliant. Here we have Odo, and really he's just about the presentation. Obviously, Odo isn't famous for carrying any significant accessories, so it really is just down to the uniform. And I think they've caught the likeness really nicely, and I think they've done a really good job of that uniform. True, it's not as tight as it would be in the show. It is a lot more woolly and loose looking, but I think this is really good. It actually, again, gives it that sense of that toyetic appeal, and I think they've rendered it really, really nicely. Moving on to the aliens, first up we have Dukat. Obviously, Dukat was the major villain of the show, the big antagonist for Ben Sisko, and they've done a really nice job of trying to capture the likeness of the actor, MacLeod. I think the overall presentation is nice. I do like this sparkly top that he's got underneath, and they've given him a plastic sort of armour piece for the torso. I do like that they've added some paint apps here. They give him the gold insignia for the Cardassian, and some of that writing on the side is in gold there. That's a nice touch. I just wish they could have applied a bit more of that to this piece, really, because it does look and feel very, very plastic at the moment. And it's a shame if they just maybe called it part of it in black, or just give it a deeper grey, then it would have looked a bit more lived in, it would have looked a little bit more textured, and that's what I feel it really, really needs. Clearly they have given this costume some thought, as they've tried to give him those sort of flaps on the wrist there, which is a nice touch. Like I said, I really like the sort of chainmail effect that they've gone for, the sparkly top. I think that's nice. And I like that the legs and the arms have a separate piece of fabric going down the centre there as well, which again just gives it more texture, a bit more detail. He does come with a number of accessories, but chief amongst them is his Cardassian rifle. Again, sadly, this does suffer from a lack of paint apps. It is a fantastic mould, lots of detailing and grooves and etchings in this prop. I mean, it is very screen accurate. I just wish I had a little bit more colour in it to really make it pop and look just more authentic. Next up, we have one of my favourites in the whole Star Trek 9-inch scale. And this is, of course, the Jem'Hadar. I love everything about this figure. I love the attention to detail, I love the texturing in his outfit, and I love these little extra pieces here that really make him pop. First off, the head sculpt is fantastic, and also the paint apps on the head are really nicely applied. We can see there's just enough there around his forehead and his nose and his chin, and of course also his lips. They're painted really nicely. There is a tendency in this line to sometimes do strange things with the lips and make their lips orange and things like that, and there's been a few times where they've dropped the ball, but here it's spot on, it's perfect, and it looks really good. Even by today's standards, this is a great mould and a great job of painting it. But I also love how they got the tube going from his neck and into his chest, so it can feed him the white. I think this is absolutely fantastic. It's a clear tube, it looks really good, it looks very authentic to the show, but also they've done it in such a way that it doesn't compromise the articulation. He can spin his head either way, and there's no danger of that tube popping out or being ripped off or breaking in any way. And I think that's really cleverly done, and it looks fantastic. Plus, we can see lots of different textures here. Lots of materials have been used in the outfit. Some of it's shiny, some of it's more coarse to the touch. It just looks really good. And there's also little details here, little add-on bits that have been sewn in, like the little button on his side there that's been sewn in there. At the top of his shoulder, we can see that sort of insignia, I guess. I'm not quite sure what that is. But again, it's a separate plastic piece, nicely painted, lots of different colours in there, and sewn in. Really neat. And then finally we have his weapon that he comes with as well. Again, this is suffering from the same lack of paint that the others have had as well. So again, very nicely sculpted, very screen accurate. Just wish there'd been a bit of shading in there, some colours, just to make it a bit more authentic to the actual screen appearance. Last but not least, we have Garak, who is anything but a simple tailor. They've chosen to go with one of his brighter costumes from the show. I think my personal preference would have been sort of the green and red one that he wears, but nevertheless, this is screen accurate and, at least is bright and colourful. And if you look carefully, you'll notice that this is actually a brand new sculpt designed to look like Andrew J. Robinson. You'll notice that the head sculpt is actually a little bit softer than the Dukat. His exoskeleton parts are still there, but they're less prominent in the sculpt, and the lines that have been used to paint on his face are a lot softer to, again, I think this is done deliberately to show that he's more friendly, he's one of the good guys. I think, I could be completely wrong on that, it's just my guess, but when you compare him to the Dukat, you can see that there's definitely a softening of the approach here to Garak. Dukat looks much more menacing, much more snake-like, much more threatening, whereas Garak looks a lot softer, he looks more friendly. Of the two, I have to say I actually prefer the Dukat because it looks a lot more screen accurate and he looks more alien. And I really like that in my action figure collection for Star Trek. Plus, of course, Dukat can double as any Cardassian soldier that you want, so you can buy a number of these and you can army build, whereas the Garak seems a lot more unique to Garak. But top marks to Playmates for actually going to the effort to actually create two different sculpts for something that they could have just reused the same sculpt here and just painted it differently. So I think that's, an extra effort there that's definitely appreciated. So there you have it, there's my lineup of my 6 favourites from Deep Space Nine in this scale. Overall, I love the 9-inch scale Star Trek figures from Playmates. I think there's a couple of things that could have been improved. I think wrist articulation would have been great, and maybe an ab crunch or a waist swivel would have been pretty cool. But aside from that, I think the articulation's pretty stand-up, they're very solid figures, they look really good, the likenesses are nicely applied, and the costumes are really well tailored. I think the only thing I would criticise them for is maybe not painting their weapons often enough. If they'd done that, then I think you would have had a really prestige collection actually. Yes, they're quite simple, and yes, they are obviously aimed at children, but they're very collectible and very, very nice looking. And they definitely rival Mego in my affections. I hope you enjoyed the vid. If you did, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe as I'll be posting more videos soon.